It's a Friday night, and I got a co-host who's not here yet because he's off getting his his beverage of choice for tonight.
I hate to say it, I don't have a beer. But, la- but we didn't podcast last week, and then so I forgot, and then so I'm gonna have a Spindrift sparkling water.
There you go.
I
Well, good
told I
news
said I
is
wasn't gonna podcast anymore if I didn't get a beer. So I wonder if people thought that's why we didn't podcast last week is because Ted didn't get his beer.
that's right.
So once again, we're still looking for somebody that can sponsor us with Athletic Brewing to get us the non-alcoholic beer.
We're working on it. I visited the booth and I was able to give my email to the one of the persons who was communicating with someone else in California. They didn't give me their email address, but I at least gave them mine, and they said yes, they're interested. So
Okay.
I just haven't heard back yet. So
Okay.
checking my email right now, and it's not gotten back to me. So
Oh, dang it, dang it.
but I've got no.
My wife said she'd buy me a 6 pack of beer just to keep me happy. I
There you
says, no,
go.
it's not the same. It's not the same.
It's not the same. That's right. Oh man! And last weekend was Pumpkin Man.
Yeah, so it was kind of it's funny, we plan on podcasting.
Yep.
Uh, but we got invited to the UNLV Tri Club team dinner the night before,
Yeah.
and our plan was to podcast from the dinner.
Yeah.
But you and I turned into bike techs all of a sudden late at night
Yeah.
last Friday night, which was great. We helped these
Yeah.
kids a lot. But yeah, it was a good weekend. It was a really good
Yeah.
weekend.
It was.
Let's give them the overview. Go ahead, John. Give them the overview of.
Well, it was so much fun meeting up with the Tri team and going through some last minute details, and it really brought back memories from my first race. And you're thinking you think you know what you're doing, but at the end of the day, there's so many unknowns doing an event, and it was fun to try to help them with the gear and even talking through a point-to-point race, which Pumpkin Man is, and that always introduces a little bit more complexity. So I really enjoyed that, and I love the attitude that they all had, where they were just going to go and they were going to do it, and it was going to be fun. And at the end of the day, that's what they did. They did it, regardless of what equipment they had or what was borrowed, what was new, or anything. It was they did the event, and one person even had a bike mechanical during the bike segment, and somehow was able to get it fixed with I don't quite know the whole story, but it sounded like a crank fell off or a pedal fell off, but somehow they were able to get it fixed to be able to finish the bike segment and then completed the run. And I love that can do attitude. So that was
Yeah,
great.
and he had a great run. He
Yeah, he
ran like
did. He
he ran
did.
like 24 minutes.
Yeah, yeah,
And I was like, okay, like that's pretty good to go through that because I think he had to wait around like a half hour for somebody
hmm
to help him fix his bike. And but that's so awesome. And we forget like the feeling of finishing your first triathlon,
that's right. Right.
right? And you could see it kind of in their eyes and on
hmm
the smiles of these
Yeah.
student athletes that they accomplished something. And at the
Yeah.
end, I said, no, like you're triathletes now. Like you can say, like
Yeah.
you did a triathlon. You're a triathlete. Oh, we're not triathletes. I'm like, yeah, you
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
And I said, and that was one of the hardest sprint races there is.
That's right.
And all six that started finished,
hmm
which is I if you'd asked me if I was a gambling man, I wouldn't have said all six would
No,
finish.
that's right.
So all six finished. Oh, I was so proud. I was proud to be associated with them. Super cool that so many people in the community were talking to us about it,
Yeah.
and asking how they could support the UNLV Triathlon
hmm
Club. And I know like we spent a lot of time and effort in helping getting it going, but it's super nice to see that people in the community are trying to get behind this. And once again, if you want to get behind it,
hmm
please do. These are some great kids that are they're trying to do something. I
Yeah.
think in college they're trying to do something exceptional. These aren't sponsored athletes or scholarship athletes. They're just students that say, hey, I want to do this and I want to be part of something and be part of a team. So it was very, very fun to be out there.
Yeah, no, and you're spot on. The community has certainly embraced them, and they've met up with them. They've helped them in different ways. A lot of people have really provided gear all different types of gear. It's really been really neat to see the community just embrace this group, and it's gonna be a lot of fun going forward with them.
Yeah, no, it's they're already trying to plan out, the next
Yeah,
races and the
yeah.
next, just like us, right? Like they finish the race and okay, what's
What's
next?
next? That's right.
And that's how you know it was successful, right? Is
Hmm.
when because a few of them were like, well, yeah, I might just do one triathlon and that'll be it.
Yeah, yeah,
But I think all of them were like, okay, yeah, like let's do another one.
yeah.
Let's, and to me, that's, I don't know, it's very special. And that's something special about triathlon.
Yeah.
When you finish it, it kind of makes you feel like you want to do another.
And it's a good example of, the building the community on building the community. In fact, one of the stories from one of the club members, he only joined. He went to what I think you know the story more than I do, but he went to the informational session just to go with a friend,
Yep.
and then all of a sudden found himself, at the start line of Pumpkin Man.
Yeah. 6 weeks later.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Oh, to be young, right? When you can
yeah.
go from nothing to complete a triathlon in 6 weeks.
And I think that's that can-do attitude, and I think that's what a lot of triathletes have. And sometimes we forget it. We forget that we have that attitude that we can do these events, and they are not easy. But yet, people toe the start line and then find their way to the finish line. And things
Yeah.
don't always go perfect. They don't always go as planned. But at the end of the day, overcoming some of those challenges is part of the victory.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And that's what we all want out of triathlon.
Hmm.
Is to overcome something and to I don't know, challenge ourselves and overcome it. To me, that's exciting. Awesome.
Yeah, and I think everyone I talked with had great experiences at Pumpkin Man, so it was really neat to see a whole bunch of local triathletes. I felt left out not doing the event. I really wanted to, but it just wasn't the right timing for me. But it was great to see so many people just enjoy that event. That's one of my favorite ones to go to and support, and either as an athlete or helping out.
It's my favorite race. I wish I could just, I could do Pumpkin Man every year. They're
Yeah.
always, not always, but lately there's always been something that's kind of got in the way
Hmm.
for me. But if I could choose one
Yeah.
sprint race or even Olympic race to do, it would be Pumpkin Man
Yeah.
every time. Yeah.
Yeah, weather was perfect, and we were hanging out and just sort of chatting with everyone, and it was a great race, great day.
Okay, so let's move on and let's talk about shoes.
Yeah.
So this is actually something I was surprised we haven't really talked much about.
Hmm.
And my idea for this was to talk about the anatomy of a shoe, of a running shoe. And I know, John, that you've done a ton of work with running shoes, with foam, with the biomechanics of running. And we started talking about this a little bit a couple of weeks ago, and I'm like, okay, I wrote this down. We need to talk about the pieces of a shoe, of a running shoe, and what the purpose of the pieces are. And so, the athletes can be a little bit more knowledgeable when they buy shoes
Hmm.
or when they think about the pieces of the shoe that are maybe important to them.
Hmm.
So, John, I'm gonna let you just kick it off, and
Oh,
well, I'll tell you if you want, I can talk about the parts, and you can. So let's actually just start. Let's pick a part. Let's start talking about the most obvious part, which to me is the upper.
yeah, yeah. So I'm just looking for a prop here for a sec. I should have had this out. Here we go. So I did my doctorate work at University of Oregon, which was one of the main research labs to look at the biomechanics of running. And my advisor, Barry Bates, was one of the leading researchers and probably one of the most well-known researchers on running injuries, looking at it from a biomechanical perspective. And I tell you that because when I went up there, I was expecting to learn instruments and measurement and all this type of stuff, doing some physics and some math. And one of the classes that I took first with him, we had to write a paper on the pencil.
Oh my gosh.
I'm like, what? What do you mean, right? And that's all he would say is, you need to write, and gave us, parameters in terms of number of words and all that, and write on the pencil. And so the point of there's a couple of points to doing that project. Was one was to see how each of us approached that sort of very nebulous, undefined project of write a paper on the pencil. And the other part was to really get to the nuts and bolts of what a pencil is.
Mm.
And so you have to define what a pencil is, and then you have to identify the structures, the minimum structures that make a pencil. And then ultimately you start adding in all these other structures that we think are part of a pencil, like an eraser head. You don't need an eraser head for a pencil. There's this silver part here. You don't need that silver part on that on a pencil. You don't need the covering or the paint. What are the minimum structures that make up a pencil, and then what are some of the other things that make up a pencil, like a mechanical pencil. Now that becomes something very different. And so it was really sort of, here I am in my PhD work and I'm talking about pencils. But it was a neat way to take a step back and say, okay, well, now let's talk about something that's really important to human performance, and that's the running shoe. Well, what is a running shoe? What's the definition of a shoe? What are the minimum structures needed for a shoe? And then, how do you build on that? And why is a shoe that we go to a store today, why does it look like what it looks like? And why are there all these different components of that shoe? It doesn't need to be that way. If we take it back to the very basic essence of a running shoe, you just need something on your foot between your foot and the ground, and then something to hold that to your foot.
Yep.
And so you start with that and you say, okay, that's the bare minimum. All right, now if I pull a shoe out, why does it have all this other stuff? It's got this part here, it's got this stuff here, it looks like different colors, different materials in the forefoot and the heel range. It's got all this upper stuff, laces, all, this cutout and all this, and I've got an insert here. What are all these structures for? And so along the way, you also have to come up with some terminology to be able to start referring to different parts of a shoe. And so I think that's what we'll talk about tonight, is the anatomy of the shoe. Because once you identify the parts of a shoe, you can start saying, oh, well, why does this shoe have this part and this shoe does not have that part? Or why is this part made differently between shoes? And I think the more that you become knowledgeable about some of the anatomy or some of the parts of the shoe, the more you can start to make decisions in terms of which shoe would be right for you.
No, I love looking at that. And in my mind, I'm thinking of like the bicycle too, right? Like a bicycle's got a seat, it's got handlebars, it's got two wheels, it's got pedals, it's got a crank, but bike A to bike B, right? A mountain bike versus a road bike versus a time trial bike versus a gravel bike or whatever. They all have they have the same basic parts,
Mm-hmm.
but some might be more robust in some areas. Some might be built more to be light. Some might be more for stability, whatever the case may be. And shoes are the exact same way. Right? So yeah, I'm excited to do this because, you and I, we talk about this. We can talk about this stuff really quite easily.
Yeah,
what's the midsole? What's the upper? What's the heel counter? What all of these things. But I think that if we can gain some knowledge for everybody here, I think it's going to be really really helpful. So let's like I said, let's start with the upper, John. So
right.
What's the upper?
Well, and there's also, modifications to shoes that we can make. Exactly. So I show this because this is still a running shoe. Maybe it's not as functional as this shoe. What shoe do you have? You have one. Okay, so you've got the Asics. I've got a Hoka here. So we'll just go through from the bottom to the top of the shoe. So
we're here at the bottom. Okay,
the bottom is the outer sole. All right, that is a hard rubber that's durable, should be durable, and is really there more for protecting the other parts of the shoe. So that outer sole is just that very thin black layer on mine, and yours is probably even thinner
mine's
than this
super thin. Mine's probably less than a millimeter, or maybe it's a millimeter. And the interesting thing about mine is it's only like here.
Yep.
here and it's not here. And I know that most people, they land on the outside
Yep.
of their foot. So maybe that's why there's just foam here and it's not
This
the
outer sole is
outer
heavier
sole.
material.
Yeah.
And so on your shoe, which is more of a racing shoe,
Yeah.
it's removing some of the unnecessary part of the outer. Like I hardly ever wear this part of the shoe down the way I
Right.
run. I hardly ever will, this will always be just fine. So why include that if you're trying to design a shoe that's as light as possible? Because we know that shoe weight influences running economy. It actually works against us when the shoe starts to get too heavy. So anyways, this surface would be the outer sole. And the outer soles are all going to be different based upon trail running, road running, track, what have you. And different companies have different types of designs of this material down here, but that's the outer. The next layer, which is something we talk a lot about, this entire layer in here is the midsole. And the midsole is between the outer and the insole. It's terrible. That's all it is the midsole. So this region is the midsole. And you can see my shoe has two different colors of midsole. It has this color and this color. These materials are actually a little bit different. And that's something to know, is that the midsole doesn't need to be a single material. You can have different types of material within the midsole. But that midsole is really functioning for that shock absorption that we talk about with a running shoe. That's what that's doing. And it's also, I know we want to talk a little bit about the movement of the heel, or ultimately the subtalar joint, in terms of pronation or supination. That also is going to contribute to how much motion the foot will be allowed in the shoe. All right, so
So,
outer sole. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
well, I was going to ask you about the midsole, John, because
Yep.
there's been a lot of changes in midsole, right? So EVA,
Yep.
TPU, PBEX now is like
Hmm.
the big thing. So these are all just different types of foam, basically,
That's right.
right? So, but shoe companies will market this foam versus this foam.
Hmm.
I know, once again, you've done a lot of work on the durability
Yep.
of the different types of foam. It's kind of like with everything else, right? The lighter in
Hmm.
general, the less durable,
Yep.
right? So just kind of keep that in mind. I think that really we're talking just about foam. So in yours, where you have the different colors,
Hmm.
I don't know, maybe one part is EVA, one part is polyurethane,
Hmm.
or maybe a TPU, which is thermoplastic polyurethane. That's all it is. It's just different types of foam. And in general, correct me if I'm wrong, John, we're talking about the midsole part. In general, the closer to the heel, if someone's a heel striker, we probably have a more dense foam.
Hmm. Yeah,
Is it
and
correct?
actually, a lot of times you'll have a dual density midsole. And
Right,
this is something actually my advisor was instrumental in designing, because you need more of the shock absorption on the outside part
right.
of the shoe than on the inside part of the shoe, because most of us will hit the ground with this region of the shoe, the lateral, the outside part of it. And so you don't need a lot of shock absorption here. You need more shock absorption on the outside. And so you can come up with this dual density, because the shock absorption would be more compressible. And so if it's compressible on the inside a lot, that might actually lead to allowing the foot to roll inward more during the stance phase. So there you need a little bit more resistant foam, in that case, a little more dense foam for what's happening during stance phase of gait. But for the impact, you need a softer sole. So you have this dual density. And like you said, there's different types of materials that shoe companies use. You can also put air in it.
Yep.
You can also
Gel.
put gel in the midsole, or even a carbon plate. There's all different things that companies will put into the midsole to hopefully aid it in something, or shock absorption, or in motion control, or to allow motion, or for performance.
But John, correct me if I'm wrong, but that is the part of the shoe that over time tends to break down
Yeah,
and causes us to have to get really new shoes.
that's right.
Is that correct?
Yeah, that's the midsole is the guts of the shoe. The outer is just protecting the midsole.
Right.
And because if we didn't have the outer, that foam would break down really fast. And I think a lot of people even see this with shoes like you have. You don't put a lot of mileage on that shoe because it's going to break down quickly. And all of a sudden you're, throwing $250 out, after running 20 to 30 miles on a pair of shoes. So the outer is protecting the midsole.
Yeah. And like your shoe, where we have a thicker outer, it's going to protect the midsole a little bit more, I
Right.
assume. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
I guess this is a good time to talk about it. With the shoe, as within the pencil,
Mm-hmm.
eh, the components work together.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're not independent.
Mm-hmm.
They all kind of have to work together in concert to get the job done. Same with your bicycle.
Well, and we have different pencils for different needs. We have a number two, we have a number one, we have different, lead darkness. We have different ways that lead interacts with the paper, and same thing with the shoe. But if we say here's the parts of a shoe, really we just need the outer and we need something to hold it on. But this midsole, and this is where different companies do their midsole differently. You've got to try to find that type of midsole that works for you.
Yep. Okay, great.
All right.
Um, one other question I was going to ask about the midsole, John,
Mm-hmm.
is not just the foam, but the shape,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is actually where we can have in some shoes maybe more of an arch support kind of built from the underside, right?
Mm-hmm.
It actually can even appear flat,
Yeah.
but once again with dual densities or changing in density,
Yep.
even the arch itself could be more robust in a certain shoe. And so when you step down, the outside might compress a little bit more in that shoe, and the arch might hold up. Or conversely, in a different shoe, not have that. And,
Mm-hmm.
and once again, it's just changing the density, but also you could physically change the characteristics to make, for example, like the medial side a little bit higher, the lateral
Mm-hmm.
side a little bit lower. Is that correct?
Oh, spot on. And let me just check and see if any of my shoes here have what we call an arch cookie. And my shoes do not have that. That was something that they started putting in. So that was an additional structure in a running shoe, was to include an arch cookie, which would be, some type of little filler that you would
Yep.
put in on top of the midsole, in underneath the insole, which is the next part, which is just that insole here that's going to be inserted into the shoe. Sometimes you even talk about the top fabric as part of the insole. Sometimes you say this is the insole insert, and then the insole is the fabric on top of there. And so what was happening early on is they were doing that exactly what you're talking about, putting a material in underneath the arch, and we called that an arch cookie. That was designed because you know people thought, well, let's put some material under the arch to support it, and there's been a lot of debate on whether or not you need that. But you're right. Now the midsoles are also being shaped with that arch in mind too. So the arch cookie doesn't show up, even though there's still some arch built up on the
Yep.
inside part of the midsole.
Well, and your shoe really shows it. That's that view you just showed. I mean, the arch on that shoe is quite robust as far as the
Mhm.
midsole.
Yeah.
Right? And I guess mine is too. I mean, if you look at this is the medial side of the shoe.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's quite built up. But this shoe is a really interesting one. It's one actually I don't run in. Um, it looks really good, but I don't run in it because I don't feel like there's enough support in the midsole in the arch for me in this shoe, especially when
Mm-hmm.
I'm running. I find that we'll get into this, but I overpronate in this shoe.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. Yep. So, and then there's different things that people will talk about when you start talking about the shape of the shoe, like you are with the arch part. They have different lasts that they build the shoe around, and the last is just, in essence, it's a fake foot. It's a foot that you wrap the material around when you're building the shoe around, or the shoe on. And there's different types of lasts for different companies, and different lasts for different models and so forth, and different size shoes as well. And so that you'll often hear people talk about the last that the shoe is built around. And the idea is just to mimic what our feet look like. Of course, my foot looks different than your foot.
Yep.
And so you would have a need for different last than I have. And that again is something that you look at different shoe manufacturers as well as different models in terms of how the shoe is, what last it's actually built on.
Awesome. Let's talk more about the insole, John, because I think there's some controversy around insoles.
Mm-hmm.
So do I need to go and buy a custom insole?
Yeah.
Or do I need orthosis?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So I want to get your opinion on that, and then I want to give you my opinion.
So the insole is in essence this insole insert is considered the insole as well as the fabric that connects the midsole to the upper, which would be the fabric part of the shoe. And then orthotics, I guess we should define what an orthotic is. It's anything that augments or somehow influences the movement of a joint.
Right.
How would you define an orthotic? Is
That's
that close?
perfect. It's funny because we often use the term orthotic to just think of like an insole, but
Mhm.
it's you can have orthosis
Yeah,
any joint. A knee brace is an
heel, yep.
orthosis,
Uh,
right? An
Knee
ankle brace is
orthotic, an elbow orthotic, whatever it is. Prosthetic device is replacing a limb
right.
that's not there anymore.
Yeah,
Uh,
orthosis is changing it.
Yep, yep. So shoe inserts, shoe orthotics come in all different styles in terms of how long they are and how wide they are and what shape they are and so forth. I'll tell you that the science on orthotics the research has been, they really don't matter.
Well,
And we,
in my experience, John, and I'll throw this
Mhm.
out, I think they really do matter, but
Mhm.
not the way we think they matter.
Oh, okay. How so?
Okay, so this is something that I teach my students all the time.
Mhm.
And when you put something in a shoe that's um, been like custom molded, let's say for
Mhm.
somebody's foot, to me, that's like putting a cast on somebody,
Mhm.
right? So it's not allowing for natural movement of that person.
Right, right, right.
And if I put a cast on somebody's foot for a long period of time, they lose the musculature to control
Mhm.
their foot. So they lose the intrinsic muscles in their foot. They even can potentially lose neuro control or neuromuscular
Mhm.
control of their foot. Um, and this happens to me, as an athletic trainer, it's happened many times where someone will come in like, yeah, somebody told me I needed orthotics in my shoe when I was a kid.
Mhm.
I started when I was 12. Now I'm 30
Mhm.
and I have nothing but knee pain and hip pain and I'm like, oh my gosh, let's look at your feet. And you
Mhm.
test the strength of their foot, and their foot is weak. Then without the orthosis, they don't have good balance. They don't have good control anymore.
Mhm.
And not that I'm sure that there's reasons that people need orthosis, but in my clinical experience, we should use orthosis for a minimal amount of time as we're doing rehabilitation.
Right.
And once again, I'm on my soapbox here, but as we're doing rehabilitation to strengthen them so they can control themselves.
Mhm.
And if the person is truly wanting to do and be athletic for a long period of time, I think that's the answer. And now this is completely different than somebody, for example, that had like a nerve damage or nerve issue, and they need this to help them walk or something.
Mhm.
I'm talking about athletes.
Right, right, right. That's a good distinction. Yeah,
Yeah,
you're right. Mhm.
I'm talking purely about athletes that are doing this for either to gain performance or because I had a plantar fascia issue, so the doctor told me I needed orthotics. I'm like, I don't think that's the case. I think
Mhm.
maybe short term to help you get over something, but we need to do therapy
Mhm.
on you to actually strengthen the structures to allow you to control yourself.
Mhm.
So that's my soapbox on orthosis.
Yeah.
Uh,
And I like how you put that because I like how you said that they do influence, but not necessarily the way that we think they do. And so I think that's a better way to put it than I did because we know that if I run in this shoe and then I run in this shoe, I am going to run different.
yes.
And partly because of the way the shoes are built, and partly because of the way the midsole and the shape of the shoe, which in essence are orthotics, if you will. And so you're right that that everything's going to always influence. It's not always predictable
Right.
how something's going to change. So, we might say that, we're in these two shoes, this is more of a racing flat than this one. We would think that I would have more impact running in the shoe that has a little less midsole thickness at the heel versus one that has more. And we have seen people do the exact opposite, that they
Yep.
have more impact when they have a thicker rear foot than a thinner rear foot. And that's because the brain is detecting something, and the brain is saying, well, we're going to move a little bit differently. And so you're spot on that if you put an orthotic in, that may cause a change in running style, but not the change that we actually would suspect would happen when you put the orthotic in.
Well, and I'll take it even a step further. So think about the plantar fascia issue, because
Hmm.
that, I think, if you haven't had a plantar fascia issue, you probably know someone that does.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say I'm running in this shoe and I get plantar fascia issues. If I make a change to this by putting orthotic in, my plantar fascia issue might go away,
Hmm.
but it's because of the change, not because I made the right change
Right,
necessarily.
right.
Right. I could also probably put a little spike or a little nail in there,
Hmm.
and you wouldn't land on your heel as hard,
Right, right.
and you could take your plantar fascia pain away. It doesn't mean that that's the cure for your plantar fascia. All we did
Hmm.
was change maybe where you landed or how you landed, and change the biomechanics of your foot as you went through
Hmm.
the gait cycle. And but the person puts that in, oh yeah, my plantar fascia feels better,
Hmm. Hmm.
and they think, well, I need to have that for running in every shoe. I need to have this. I need to have this, and every time I change shoes, I need to have that piece of orthosis. And to me, that's not the answer, because the foot itself is extremely complicated,
Hmm.
right? Like the gait cycle and when we're running and what happens
Right.
to all of the 20, is it 26 bones in each foot? Yeah, 20,
Hmm.
26 bones. What happens in the interaction of those 26 bones in the foot is actually really, really important.
Hmm.
And as athletes, we need to be able to control that. And the shoe is helping us, but
Hmm.
it shouldn't hopefully be altering us too much. And that's my opinion. But
Yeah, and I guess maybe this is a time, and we haven't gotten, we don't have too much more anatomy on the shoe, but we can. But I think this is so important to address the barefoot running
yeah,
issue as well, because this is partly the argument for running without shoes, or the argument for why running shoes may be interfering with how the foot should function. And what we can tell now, because we went through, initially there was a barefoot running phase back in the 60s and 70s. Then the shoe came out, and then the running shoe really sort of dominated all the talk and developing a running shoe. And then probably about 12, 15 years ago, it started to come back as a movement to run in bare feet instead of shoes, and the shoe may be a cause for some of the injuries that we see during running. And what we know now is if you're going to run in bare feet, you're going to probably just be as likely of getting an injury as running in any running shoe. Running is an impact sport, and it's really hard to know exactly what is going to cause that running injury. We can do some things to mitigate that risk of overuse injury, and most of the time it is training volume or training mistakes that we're making, where we're exceeding some threshold of the structure to repair itself.
yeah.
And so running in bare feet is not the answer. But I do think out of that whole movement, an important message is to be in bare feet as much as you can. But when you're running, you're probably best off putting a pair of running shoes on for that period of time. But being in bare feet in your house, walking around in bare feet outside, your kids being in bare feet, I think there's a lot of benefit to that, because that is how that foot's going to develop with those that barefoot in mind. But ultimately, when you're going to go out, run on pavement and run on, the streets that we have, having a running shoe that works with you is probably the best thing to do.
It's so interesting, right? Like, this is everyone's kind of experienced this, the next little anecdote I'll tell, and that is walking on the beach,
Yeah.
right? So walk on the beach barefoot, and what happens to you?
Hmm.
If you walk the same distance you'd walk, let's say you walk 5 miles, your feet are going to be sore.
Yeah.
Well, they're sore because you're working musculature
Hmm.
that you haven't worked in a long time,
Right.
and
Very.
that's a good thing.
Hmm.
Right? And we're unlucky in that we don't have good beaches to walk on here.
Right. Right.
But whenever I go down to California, every time my wife and I would go, we do like usually a night walk and a morning walk on.
Hmm.
I always go barefoot,
Yeah.
right? Because I'm like, this is a chance for me to strengthen my feet. Our house, same thing. We take our shoes off in our house, probably because of the sanitary reasons, but also because I think it's healthy for
Hmm.
us.
Hmm.
Even when I'm teaching,
Yeah.
sometimes I take my shoes off. My students are like,
Yeah.
"What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm just standing
Yeah.
here. Why do I need
Yeah.
support just to stand
Hmm.
here? I'm better off not having shoes on."
Hmm. Hmm.
So,
No,
yeah,
totally.
I think that's
And
great.
this comes back to, walking on a beach. That's so different that if you do, let's say you normally run 4 miles a day, and you go run 4 miles on the beach in bare feet, you're going to get injured
Oh, for sure.
because
For
it's too different. And so we need to be really careful about running and the changes that we place the body under when we change a pair of shoes or we change in a a different surface. And I experienced this, right before Tempe 70.3. I was walking a lot. I walk around in my Crocs a lot outside. Very flexible, absorbable, foamy sandals, and I just found myself needing to run to try to get back to the car for quickly, and within a quarter of a mile, all of a sudden I was like, something's not right with the way I'm hitting the ground,
yeah,
and that was an injury just waiting to happen because it was something different. And each time we hit the ground, it's almost 2.5, 3 times your body weight. And if you're not used to the way the stress is being placed on the structure, then you're introducing a chance of an injury. And anytime you change your shoes, you're changing the way you're running. You're changing the forces that are being placed on different structures in the foot, in the leg, in the knee, and in the hip. And so you really need to be careful.
agreed. John, we have a few more pieces of anatomy.
Few more pieces. We did the insole. Now we get the upper.
How about the upper? Yeah.
And the upper is any of this fabric, any of this stuff that is above the insole, and it's now holding the insole and the midsole and the outer sole to your foot. And it does, every shoe company uses they use different types of fabrics. There's all these little extra things that are often put on. I don't have anything on these. Oh, here's a unique uh,
Oh, yeah.
upper, and this is for running in the water. So it's got some extra structures on here to sort of catch the water and make it a little bit more challenging.
I had no idea those even existed. I need a pair
Yeah.
of those.
Yeah. And then we talk about the vamp or the 4 foot portion because we start talking about the toe box, how wide this toe is here. And then the laces, the eyelets, the tongue, these are all parts of the upper. And if we're getting to think to what the bare minimum of a running shoe is, you don't need all this stuff. And so you can actually find running shoes without the laces. And there's a lot of laceless shoes that are being developed. Actually, this is one of the more recent trends, is to come back and build a shoe without laces, which was something that was the trend back in the 80s as well, or even 70s, to build a shoe that did not have laces.
So I think the upper is really interesting because in general with running shoes, it's like some kind of mesh,
Mm-hmm.
right, or something that's knitted or woven, right? And what we're seeing is a lot of these are now becoming more what's the word, elasticy.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? Like this one is not really. It's pretty sturdy. But the shoes that I'm running more in, it's actually it's a woven material that's got a lot of elasticity to it,
Mm-hmm.
which I really like because I have a pretty wide forefoot,
Right.
and I find that more of the elastic nature is better for me
Mm-hmm.
because of the wider forefoot. Maybe I need a wider shoe, but the pliability of the upper does make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's some other cool things in an upper. So the one that I think is interesting is a lot of people have reflective material on
Yeah.
their
Yeah.
uppers,
Right.
right? So if you're running at night, I mean, the time's about to change, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people run after work
Yeah.
and they'll have like a reflective thing here, or reflective.
That's what this is
Yeah,
here.
yeah, just enough that
Mhm.
if a car goes by
Mhm.
and they might pick that up. I know people wear reflective on their clothes or whatever, but
Mhm.
I think it's something that is not going to add weight,
Yeah.
right? So that's something for safety. The other thing is some of the shoes even have like things like Gore-Tex.
Mhm.
So like a waterproof shoe. I know like for trail running shoes,
Yeah.
a lot of them have a Gore-Tex upper to help, keep water out or keep them a little warmer even.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of variety in the upper, and then even shape of upper.
Mhm.
Right? So some shoes have a very straight shoe lacing. I think do the Hokas have a little angled lacing, John?
Um, and
Yeah,
there's different ways to lace those
yeah. There's
shoes.
lots of different ways to lace
Yeah.
them, but even like the direction, some shoes have a more of
Mhm.
an angled,
Yeah.
some are more straight. Um, Once again, I think some of that's marketing,
Yeah.
right? And whatever fits best for you. But you're right. There are different ways to lace shoes for different like gait
Mhm.
characteristics. To be honest with you, I've tried a bunch of different ones, and I used to teach it in one of my classes. Like, well, for this type of foot, you might want to try.
Mhm.
You could try them, but I think it's more anecdotal that if something
Mhm.
works or doesn't work.
I love it, and you're right. There is some interesting characteristics of the upper, even when you get down to this part here and how
Oh
high the
yeah,
heel is, how this works for you, and where it rubs and where it doesn't rub. And you certainly want to make sure that this part, and especially the back here, is the heel counter. There's usually a cup right here that's plastic and rigid, and how much there is. Yeah, if I look at this one here, which I've cut away, obviously. There's a rigid plastic cup that this is the remnants of it here that comes up and holds that heel more in place. Um,
so that's the heel counter, right?
Ear
Is we
counter,
call
right?
it.
Hmm.
So can you talk about its role in stabilizing the heel?
Yeah, well, that's this will get us down the path of pronation. Is
Okay.
the idea of that heel cup, and they're all going to be different on different types of shoes, is how rigid this rear portion of the shoe is. I should have had a foot model here. I don't have it, but in our foot, the rear part of our foot, the calcaneus, or we would, layman what would say the heel, that rotates inwards and outwards while we run. And the idea of this heel cup is to support that calcaneus to allow for that movement or to minimize the movement of the calcaneus.
Yeah, and so it's actually the calcaneus and the talus, right?
Yeah,
And it's
yeah.
the interaction between them. So it's a really interesting thing because this is once again I was talking. Well, we don't want to mess with too much, but what I've seen in the literature is that we want to actually mess with a little bit there, right,
Hmm.
and give some stability there. And I think it has to do with that more of the instantaneous load that happens and that quick movement of it's called the subtalar joint of the subtalar joint. And from my reading, in running shoes, especially, having a good fitting heel counter is actually for some people really, really important,
Hmm. Hmm.
but not everybody,
Right.
right? You think about more of like a midfoot striker or even a forefoot striker, having a heel counter for them might not matter at all,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? And so, same thing, like try a shoe with a really strong one. This one's pretty flexible, but
Yep.
there's something there. We talked a couple weeks ago about the Nike Freeze. They
Hmm.
basically had no heel counter,
Right.
right? And so once again, like, try something. And if you start to feel pain just, above, like in the heel, above the heel, maybe you need more heel counter.
Yeah, right.
And that could be an answer. There's also ways to tie your shoe that can tighten the heel counter. So one of the things that people may or may not know, this is my understanding, is this last hole, when we utilize that, it snugs the heel counter.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you don't use that last hole, your heel counter might not be as snug. So
I like it.
yeah. Anyhow, that's my understanding of the heel counter. One other thing I'm going to add, John, and you brought it up, was on the upper,
Yeah.
was once again how it fits here, where,
Mm-hmm.
where your ankle bones, we call them
Right.
medial and lateral malleolus.
Mm-hmm.
I
Right.
have personally, I have a low lateral medialis or malleolus.
Yeah.
And for me, it's hard to sometimes find a shoe that's low enough here.
Mm-hmm.
And I get rubbing there, and I'll try a shoe. I'm like, oh nope, can't run in that shoe within the first 10 seconds because it just that is too high.
Yeah.
I noticed on your race shoe, it was really low, like
Mm-hmm.
really cut out low.
Yeah, this one. Yeah.
Yeah, like
Mm-hmm.
I want to run in that shoe because
Yeah.
I see that, and to me, like that's been a problem. Like
Mm-hmm.
somebody could give me a $250 pair of shoes that's free, and if that was too high, I couldn't run in them.
Mm.
That's just me. So once again, that piece of the upper has to fit.
Yeah. And like you said, almost right away.
Yeah.
And you were talking about the flexibility of the shoe, the upper. Sometimes it is more of even a sock liner that you're putting on, so you don't even need to wear socks if it's already built into the shoe. So again, these are things where you don't need the sock liner.
Nope.
You need something to connect the the outer sole, the midsole, and insole to the foot, and that's the upper. And then you have all these different modifications to it.
Okay, I'm going to quiz you because you're a shoe expert. What's in the heel counter on the inside? We have foam,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's thicker up here, and then as I go deeper into the shoe, it's thinner. So I've got this piece that's kind of a hook here. What's the hook called?
You know what? I knew that at one point. I don't.
It's
I
got
don't
a funky
remember.
name. I can't remember it either.
It
So
does. Yeah.
I shouldn't have even brought it up because we didn't discuss it before. But it's actually it's an important piece as well. Is this little, like almost all shoes have got like a little bit of a hook,
Mm-hmm.
and it actually provides stability as well because the Achilles tendon it gets kind of cushioned by the foam here, and then this hooks basically on the calcaneus.
Mm-hmm.
And when you lift up, it actually helps bring the shoe up and makes you not basically slide your calcaneus out of the shoe.
Mm.
But I can't remember the name of it either. So
No, I can't either. Yeah, there's a funny, it's a funny name. And the same thing, there's a funny name for the little tab here that holds the laces in. I don't remember things like that. So.
which tab are you talking about?
Where it holds the laces on the tongue. There's a funny.
Oh yeah. That funny
Yeah,
tab.
yeah. That's got a name, but so
Okay, I looked it up as we were doing. It's called the collar padding.
yeah, okay.
Is
Oh,
that right?
collar padding is this part here.
Well, that's there.
Yeah,
Okay, internal heel counter, external heel counter,
yeah, yeah. That's
Achilles tendon protector.
oh, there you go.
That's what we got.
There are all different names for different parts, and sometimes they're proprietary. They go along with a particular shoe model and what have you. But um, well, let's go back to something else that people are most likely hearing a lot of, and that's stack height or drop height. They're different terms, but the stack is describing how high or how much material there is between the foot and the ground. And
Yep.
typically we talk about rear foot stack, this height right here, which is going to somewhere where the foot is, not necessarily this line here. It's not this thickness here. It's wherever the foot is. And so the foot, the way the shoe's designed, sometimes that heel will sit even lower than what this line is right here. But that stack height in the rear, and then the stack height in the forefoot. of the shoe. So it'll be somewhere around this region here. And you can buy shoes with different stack heights for the rear part and for the forefoot. And then we also talk about the drop in a shoe, and that's just simply the difference between the stack in the rear and the stack in the forefoot. And then we start categorizing different shoes as minimalist shoes or zero drop shoes or anything less than 4 millimeter difference between the rear and the front. And then now we have rules in terms of how high the rear foot can be. What's that? 40? Is it 45 millimeters? I should know that.
40.
40 millimeters. Yeah, yeah.
And actually, it's interesting, right? Because this was big because this was in the news in triathlon because
Yeah.
Patrick Lang, was it Patrick Lang? No, it was Gustav Iden.
Gustav Iden, yeah.
When he won Kona, his stack was, I can't remember, it was like 50 millimeters.
Yeah.
But at the time, there was no limit in triathlon, but there was a limit in world athletics. So World Athletics is the governing body for track and field and marathoning, and they set a standard that's 40 millimeters was the most you could have in stack height. And I think World Triathlon adopted that rule now. 40 millimeters is the top. So John, why would an athlete want a bigger stack?
Well, this is the way shoes were built for a long time, is to have more material in the heel with the idea that the heel is absorbing the shock. And so if you have more shock absorbing material, you're protecting the foot more. That was the general idea. And along the way, the forefoot was just built with less material. There wasn't really a reason behind it other than it didn't need as much material. So to make the shoe lighter, you would just have less stack in the front part of the shoe. But then people started to look at it and say, wait a second, a 10 millimeter, you run differently in a 10 millimeter drop shoe versus a 4 millimeter drop shoe, or the difference between how high the rear and the forefoot are. And so then there tended to be more work in that area. But I would say initially it was more just traditionally trying to put more material in the rear part to absorb the shock and less material in the front to reduce the weight of the shoe.
Okay, so let's talk about drop then. So how do we define drop in a shoe? We're talking about it's midsole drop, right?
Yeah, it's the difference in the height in the rear and the front part of the shoe. So the difference in the rear stack and the forefoot stack. If they're the same stack, there's zero drop. If the heel is higher, it has more stack than the forefoot, then it will be some positive number. So a typical shoe, like a training shoe like this is probably a 10 millimeter drop shoe. So that means that there's 10 millimeters difference in height between the rear and the forefoot. This is probably closer to a 4 millimeter drop shoe. And so that means that there's almost the same height in the back and the front.
Okay. So why would I want a 10, an 8, a 6, a 0? Why would I do that?
That's a great question. This is where the minimalist shoe movement started calling for shoes that mimic the foot more. And the foot has a zero drop. So the foot is, when you're in bare feet, you're standing there, that's zero drop. There's nothing between the heel and the ground or between the forefoot and so now the idea was, well, maybe that's how we should be designing shoes. And that's where trying to develop shoes that had less of a drop than traditionally was part of the movement.
Okay, so back to my question. What should I run in?
Well, that's
8, 6, 4, 0.
That's the magic question, and there's no clear answer to it. But it goes back to what type of shoe, what type of drop is good for you is dependent on how you run. And if you are a rear foot striker, you probably will have a shoe that has a greater drop, like a 10 millimeter drop, than someone who strikes with a forefoot. because you don't need all that material in the rear foot if you're striking with the forefoot. And so
Right.
you can make your shoe actually lighter. Or if you're a midfoot striker, you need more of the cushioning somewhere in between the heel and the forefoot. So it comes back to how you run in the shoes.
Yeah. No, I love that. And the other piece, and I'm always about injury prevention, is be very careful when you switch shoes.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing, like, if you are always running in a 10 mm drop,
Mm-hmm.
and once again, like, oh, there's a new race shoe that's coming out, and you're like, I want to be the fastest shoe, and it's a 0 drop or 2 mm drop, you're going to actually be putting extra stress on your posterior chain, in particular your Achilles and your calf. And so making those switches can be detrimental,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you're doing it quickly. We've talked about this a lot of times on our podcast, John, is when you make changes, make them subtly and over time. Like, in my experience with this, it's probably over months of
Mm-hmm.
slowly adapting to the drop. And it's big. Like, when you go, a lot of people even going from a 10 to a 0. Oh, I went to a 0 drop shoe because my friend is in a 0 drop shoe and they never have injuries. Well, your friend is a forefoot striker or a midfoot
Mm-hmm.
striker, and you're a heel striker, and you've been running 80 miles a week in a 10 mm drop
Mm-hmm.
shoe, and that's not the right answer for you
Mm-hmm.
right now. And once again, this has happened to me, and I've had patients with this, where they've got something wrong. Oh, like my IT band is hurting, and like, oh, so I went to a 0 drop shoe and it went away. Well, it's because you're running different.
Yeah.
The pathology is still there,
Mm-hmm.
and you could potentially be creating more problems.
Mm-hmm.
And so, just once again, be careful with when you change shoes. And to me, a drop is something that is actually really kind of critical to know.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have no idea what their drop is,
Mm-hmm.
right? You think about, like, the average recreational runner, they don't know.
No.
And it's kind of like, John, I can ask you a question. What's your crank length on your bike?
172.5.
And you know it exactly, right?
I know. Right. Right.
But the average person, that's like 90% of bike owners, maybe
Mm-hmm.
95% of bicycle owners, have no idea what their crank length
Yep.
is. And it's the same with drop in running shoes.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to be careful as practitioners and as people that are looked at as experts, that we know what drop
Mm-hmm.
is and can explain this to them. And you can find the drop of any shoe, like any running shoe. You just do a little Googling.
Mm-hmm.
But, well, once again, we can be marketed to, right? Oh, a 0 drop shoe is the best thing because it's the more natural this,
Mm-hmm.
this, and this. And you could be marketed to and say, yeah, I want to do this. I need to do this. And
Mm-hmm.
you go out and you spend that $150 on that 0 drop shoe.
Mm-hmm.
And once again, it might feel good right in the beginning,
Yeah.
but it might not be good for you in the end. And that's not being said that it can't be the shoe for you. It could
Mm-hmm.
very well be a really good shoe for you. Just gotta be careful.
So, when you ask me, why buy a 0 drop or a 4 mm drop or a 10 mm drop, I know my answer is very unsatisfying in that there is no answer to that. And this is where I think the minimalist shoe movement actually did do something really good, and that was to expand the types of shoes available for people. Because as you're talking, you're spot on in that we all run a little bit differently, and we all run a little bit differently in different shoes. And this is why it's often very unsatisfying to say, well, what shoe should I have? We've been talking for an hour, and we can't answer that. There's not one type of shoe, but there's a lot of available styles of shoes, and it's good to try them and to see what tends to work and what's comfortable, what's not comfortable, what gives you some pain. It's also important that if you buy a pair of shoes and you start running in it and you start having pain, you've got to go back to that shoe store and say, no, this isn't the right shoe for me. You can't be brand loyal. You can't be shoe model loyal. You can't be color loyal. Any of that. You've got to find the shoe that works, and sometimes that shoe that works is the one that doesn't cause pain while you're running.
Yeah. And in my rant about, like, slowly changing, if
Mm-hmm.
you're if you've historically been in shoes that cause you pain
Yeah. Yeah.
and you find one that doesn't,
Right.
don't don't necessarily go slow into it. Like if
Mhm.
you've had pain for every shoe you ever tried,
Mhm.
there's a person I work with right now, and that was the case with her. She
Yeah.
always had forefoot pain. We tried this shoe, we tried this shoe,
Mhm.
we tried this shoe for years, and then we found one shoe. Instantly, pain was gone,
Mhm.
and like, okay, we are never going back. You are
Right.
always going to be in that shoe, and it's been 2 or 3 years now, and no
Mm.
foot pain.
Yep.
And it's like, okay, that's the shoe,
Right.
right?
Right.
And but it was a trial and error. It was a lot of shoes
Mhm.
that went into it. Now, that being said, John, the literature is not really good on this shoe will fix this injury,
Right. Right.
right?
Mm.
But a lot of it is really just trial and error.
Yep. It's unfortunate. We've done a lot of research,
Yeah.
and at the end of the day, you do need to try different shoes and see what works. But I think that what's good about this discussion that we're having is knowing the different parts that are on the shoe, and knowing that you don't need all those parts, and some shoes have extra parts, is important, because when you go in there looking at two pairs of shoes, on the outside they may look the same, but they may actually, the guts of the shoe may actually be quite different in terms of what the midsole is made of, how high the midsole is in the rear foot versus the forefoot. But for an untrained eye, a shoe may just look like a shoe. And so it is important um, to even, whatever shoe if you're listening to this podcast, know what your shoe is that you're running right now. What is the drop? What is the stack in the rear part? What is the stack in the forefoot?
And
What
what's the
is
type of foam?
Yeah, what is that exactly? What is the type of midsole that you have? What's the outer sole look like?
Yeah.
And know that, so that when you go and explore other shoes, you can at least pick something that's different or that's similar in certain characteristics.
Awesome. Okay, so the trivia question, John, lace loop or tongue loop was the name.
Oh, there's another name. I'm gonna have to look it up, but yeah,
Okay, that's what
yeah,
when you're talking, I Googled it, and that's what
that's
I
a
came
very
up.
functional name.
Lace loop or tongue loop. Yeah.
Uh,
So I'm sure there's something else. All right, John. Hey, we covered a lot of ground. We didn't
yeah.
even get into the gait cycle and pronation and
Mhm.
subluxation, but that's perfect because it'll leave us for another podcast.
Awesome.
Awesome.
All right. Well, hey, have a great weekend.
Yeah, you too. Hope the training goes well and the weather stays beautiful. I mean, it was a beautiful day out there today, and it's supposed to be nice, I think, this weekend. So yeah, have
I
a
know.
great weekend.
I love this time of year.
Me too. All right, awesome.
All right. Talk soon.
Hey, bye bye.